Well, the Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, Barbara Creecy, has echoed the call of the President that developed countries should take action and honour the climate funding they promised to developing nations years ago. That's ahead of the climate change conference, COP27, that kicks off in Egypt tomorrow. The Minister joining us now. Minister, thank you very much. How optimistic are you going into COP27? Because we know that facing a very cold winter, many European countries have gone back to using coal where they had moved on before. It seems like climate change has moved down the agenda rather than up.
Well, I think let me start by greeting yourself and all of your viewers and say that, of course, in the situation that we are in on the African continent, where each and every day we experience the devastating impacts of climate change, those developed countries who have caused the problem through the accumulation of greenhouse gases that have resulted from their industrialization and also their development, cannot renege on the commitments that they made at COP26. They can't renege on their commitments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. They cannot renege on their commitment to give adaptation equal weight to mitigation. And of course, as you said in your introduction, they must honor the historical commitments they have made to support developing countries in their quest to make themselves more climate resilient.
Reportedly $100 billion, is that the right amount? That was pledged way back in 2009. So what has happened since then?
Well, I think one has to start by saying it was $100 billion per year, and it has never been honoured. I think the closest we got was $80 billion at one stage. But the consequence of this is that developing countries that are facing the extreme effects of climate change are having to dip into scarce resources to make their countries more resilient. And of course, what it means is that it's very difficult for many of these countries to get ahead of the curve. One of the thorny issues that we're going to confront at Sharm el-Sheikh is going to be the issue of loss and damage. Now, loss and damage happens when you cannot make your country more climate resilient. And so, of course, we are seeing more and more extreme weather events that can wipe out whole cities in the course of one severe storm. And these are the kind of damages and loss and damage that small island states and other vulnerable countries are wanting to see developed countries make good on. But best practice is always that if prevention is better than cure. And so, of course, if there were more climate finance available for developing countries, those countries could take their own proactive steps to make their economies and their societies more climate resilient. And this, of course, would have enormous benefit for vulnerable people and for the livelihoods of those vulnerable people, not to mention the economies of the developing countries concerned.
All right, can we talk about South Africa? So the funding that is there, it's not always given. Sometimes it's in the form of loans. From this pot, is that where we get the $8.5 billion that has been pledged? But the president's saying that's not nearly enough. We need 1.5 trillion. And the reason I bring this up as well is because people are saying, well, if we're lending money, does that come with strings attached? Does it mean we have to play their game in terms of how we transition, or will we keep that sovereignty?
So let's start with your first question. And your first question is, does the 8.5 billion come out of the global pot? And the answer is no. This was a partnership which South Africa entered into with certain major countries such as the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and the European Union. And this was bilateral pledges, and it doesn't come out of the general pot. The second issue you're raising is this grant financing or loan financing. There is a very small grant component, and in the 8.5 there is loan financing. The condition that National Treasury has always laid down is that we have to be able to borrow this money cheaper than we can borrow money on the open capital markets. Otherwise, there's absolutely no point in having this facility. And lastly, there would be guarantees to loans that could be made by the private sector to private sector partners for investments in electric vehicles, green hydrogen, or renewable energy.
All right.
So I think that the point that the President was making when he addressed the Climate Commission yesterday is that he would definitely want to see the grant component increased so that there is money available for those aspects of our transition that don't have a direct revenue stream. And an example of this would be the active labor market policies we would need in order to support workers and communities in vulnerable industries.
All right, and you've been quoted as saying that this is a matter of trust, because the developed world has to stick to its pledge. From our side, does there also have to be trust as well that the money will be well spent? We've had Eskom saying recently that it won't be able to keep the lights on unless there are some concessions around environmental protection. We have incredible levels of pollution in Mpumalanga. That's an ongoing problem. What do we have to fix from our side or prove from our side to be eligible for this money?
Well, we have always been clear that the investment plan must be a South African-led plan, and it must be a plan that assists us not only with our just transition to a lower carbon economy, but it must also assist us with our overall problems of inequality, poverty, and of course, one of the side effects must be energy security. So I think that in the discussions that have been had with the international partner group, there is an understanding of the importance for this plan to be South African-led and South African-driven, and the principles on which this plan would be built were agreed on before the original offer was made at COP26. So I think that of course, in all loan agreements, there would be nitty-gritties, and those would have to be entered into between National Treasury and the partners. But I think generally there is acceptance of the importance of this plan being South African-led, and also acceptance that this plan has to help us in our quest for climate justice. And climate justice essentially means that those directly affected must be part of developing the solution. They must be part of the beneficiaries of the solution. And obviously, the plan in general must help us with our development challenges as a developing country.
All right, Minister, thank you for starting that explanation. I have so many questions. I hope we can chat to you during COP27 or afterwards and just understand all these financial issues and how are African countries standing together. We'll watch and see as COP27 kicks off in Egypt tomorrow. Thank you. That was the Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, Barbara Creecy.